Today we are going to be starting a new thing. Basically, what we're going over is the LEAP questions. I have right here your study guide. You should have a paper copy, and we're going to go over released sample items from the LEAP test, so that way you will be prepared for that LEAP test. We're starting all the way at the beginning with westward expansion, which is basically 1865 or so, right around the death of President Abraham Lincoln. And we're going to start off with some skills, okay? So, and some definitions here. So, westward expansion to progressivism, industrialization and westward expansion, okay? And European immigration. As you probably know, most of the people that came to the United States are of European origin, and so that's why we're going to talk about them first. After the Civil War, European immigration increased significantly due to several factors. And there are these things called pushes and pulls. These are sociological terms that we use in history to determine why people move from one place to another. It's very simple. A push is a factor that makes you want to leave a country, that pushes you out. It's always negative, okay? Whereas a pull is a factor that attracts you to a new country. So an example of a push would be something like a war or a bad economy. Whereas an example of a pull would be something like job opportunities or free land, which was the case in the United States of America. As you remember in class, we were giving out 160 free acres of land with the Homestead Act. If you just built a house and you stayed there for 5 years, you got all that land for free, which was really unheard of throughout the rest of the world. That's a lot of land, and to give it out for free is a very good deal for everybody. Except for the Indians, of course, that we took it from. All right, here we go. Which was a push factor in immigration to the United States in the early 1900s? So, push factor, that means what's the negative thing that's going to make immigrants leave their country? All right, quotas on immigration by nationality. Okay, maybe. Economic opportunity, that's going to be a pull for sure. Religious freedom is a pull. Poverty in the home nation of immigrants, that's definitely going to be a push, okay? Poverty is always a negative thing. That means being poor, by the way, if you don't know what the word poverty means. Now, when people got here, when Europeans got here, they came across the Atlantic Ocean, and our government back then, unfortunately we don't do this right now, our government wanted to know who exactly was coming into our country and what kind of physical condition they were in and what kind of skills they might bring to the table. We didn't want to let just anybody in, because then you get a lot of people that are not good for society that come here. So if you're coming from Europe, you're going to check in most likely at Ellis Island in New York, okay? And the way I remember this is European starts with an E, Ellis starts with an E, so the Europeans went to Ellis Island, okay? And when they got there, they got checked out. They got a criminal background check. They were asked several questions, including their name, of course. And they were also checked out by doctors to make sure that they weren't letting anybody into this country that was bringing some horrible disease. And so if you were found to have a disease or to be sick, they would put you in quarantine. I shouldn't have to explain what that means anymore. They would put you in quarantine until you got better. And if you never got better, or if it looked like your disease was incurable, they sent you back home to your original country. So here we go. What did immigrants typically experience at Ellis Island in early 1900s? And we are talking about evaluation for medical issues. This is something we definitely need to do nowadays, but the people that are flooding across our border are not getting checked out as much as we would like, for sure. So right now we're under a policy of catch and admit to the country, which is not going to be good for the country eventually. All right, those people that were born here, that were Americans, they developed this new thing called nativism. And the root word of nativism is native, which means you were born here. And these people thought that because they were born here, that they should have more rights than immigrants that were coming to this country just, fresh off the boat. And so they started these nativist collectives and nativist clubs that would discriminate against the immigrants that were coming into America. There are nativists still today, folks. There are still people that believe this, and whether you think it's a bad thing or a good thing, I'm going to leave that up to you, okay? I'm not going to really tell you what I think about it. So nativists fought against immigrants coming to America. Many immigrants came from Southern and Eastern Europe with cultures that were foreign to Americans. They were Jewish and Catholic. Nativists opposed immigrants because they were competing for jobs. This is the biggest complaint of a nativist, folks. They're taking our jobs. And you still hear it today, okay? That's the number one complaint, is that people are taking our jobs. Actually, the second biggest complaint today, other than taking our jobs, is that these immigrants are living off the government for free. Basically, people are coming to America to get a check from the government. And a lot of nativists are very upset about that. All right, which best describes nativism? Well, it's going to be prejudice against immigrants. Okay, so we are prejudging, that's what that means, immigrants that come to this country. All right, before 1930, most immigrants came from Europe, especially Southern and Eastern Europe. Okay, there we go. A lot of them were Italians. In fact, at one point, there were more Italians in the United States than there were in Italy, that was crazy. That was the early 1900s. A lot of Italians came during that time period. All right, we got urbanization and immigration. Okay, America's industrialization. Well, let's talk about these two words first. I'm sorry. Urbanization is the growth of cities. Okay, immigration, as you know, is the moving from one country to another. Okay, so anyway, here we go. America's industrialization, which means the growth of industry, the growth of factories, attracted migrants and immigrants, rapidly increasing the population of new industrial cities. So most of the factories in our country were along the East Coast, where America first started as a colony. You remember the 13 colonies, right? They're all on that East Coast next to the Atlantic Ocean. So those were the most developed cities at the time. Therefore, they had the most people. Therefore, that's where you put the factories. They also had access to easy transportation through the Atlantic Ocean and through our river network and a growing railroad network, which is going to modernize America and put us above everybody else in the world. Okay. Migrants involved the following. Improvements in agricultural technology sped up this industrialization. Farmers lost their jobs to technological unemployment and moved to urban areas to get factory jobs. So as technology increased, as the railroads spider-webbed out into the country, farming technology in particular increased a lot. And instead of having 1,000 men working a field like during the slavery days, you have one man working a 1,000-acre field, and now he has a tractor, he has a horse-drawn mechanical reaper, he has a combine or something to reap the crops. So as these farmers lost their jobs to machines, this is called technological unemployment. What ends up happening is they need a job, so they go to where the jobs are. And in the American Industrial Revolution of the late 1800s and early 1900s, those jobs were again in the Northeast, in the cities. That's where everybody's moving. And that is why that area of the country is so ethnically diverse today. We have the most ethnically diverse area in the entire world in the northeastern section of the United States today, even now. Hundreds of languages are spoken in New York City alone because of this reason. I mean, how many people in Louisiana speak, more than one language, So African Americans migrated to escape the Jim Crow laws. If you remember the Jim Crow laws, they were these segregation laws and racial injustice, and to obtain better jobs and housing. Again, everybody that's coming to America, everybody that's moving around within America, they're all looking for one important thing, and that's jobs. And the jobs, again, are in the Northeast, in the cities, in the industrial area. Most immigrants were European. Europe's population had doubled between 1800 and 1900, pushing, see that word right there? The doubling of the population is a push, okay? pushing Europeans to America looking for farmland and better jobs. Farmland and better jobs would be pulls. Okay? So, a disastrous potato famine in Ireland caused many Irish to move. So, Ireland has really rocky soil. It's not very good for much, but they can grow potatoes. And potatoes pack a whole lot of calories, lots of carbohydrates, and they can be used to substitute for many things in your diet. It turned out about 60% of the Irish diet was potatoes. Okay, so you're having potatoes for every meal, you know. But in the late 1800s, around the time of the Civil War, 1860s or so, the potatoes in Ireland started dying off because of a disease that was running rampant through the potatoes. And millions of Irish people were starving to death. So instead of that, they looked around and they said, well, where can we go? And the best place on earth to go was the United States, because we were the land of opportunity. Here we go. Why did the Irish leave Ireland? And the answer is going to be shortage of food. Okay? Now, in this question, we do have a very close answer that might be true, which is diseases. Okay? Well, I'm taking this to mean diseases in people, because if you're talking about diseases of potatoes, then that would be the correct answer. But these diseases, even then, created a shortage of food, which pushed the Irish out of Ireland, and they were pulled to the United States. All right, political and European nationalism created many wars, forcing out refugees. So we're having wars all over Europe. That's a push. That's another push. Religious reasons. There were ethnic cleansing. There were the Russians were killing off Jews. The Germans were against the Jews, and all this stuff was going on. And so many Jews came to the United States. And it's not just Jews. You know, when you have a war, people that don't want to be involved in the war, they want to run away from the war. And so that's what was going on there. Those are all pushes. Migrants and immigrants were attracted to northern cities for a few reasons. Let's go ahead and talk about them. Why did they go to the Northeast, right? Convenience, okay? They settled where they got off their ship. Well, all European immigrants had to go through Ellis Island, and Ellis Island is a little tiny island right off the coast of New York City. So once they got processed, they were released into New York City, and they tried immediately to find a job and find an apartment and things like that. And because they got off the boat there they stayed. That was the thing. Economics. Booming Northeast factories attracted workers who lived near them. So you're getting off the boat, or you're getting away from the South, and all of the economic opportunities are in the Northeast, where the factories are during the Second Industrial Revolution. We have safety. New ethnic communities like Little Italy and Chinatown were protected immigrants from nativist violence. So the nativists are out there with baseball bats trying to beat up the immigrants, and the immigrants band together, and they make the first gangs of the United States. The Italians especially, they made the mafia, you know, all that stuff that they brought over from the old world. Cultural supports. Immigrants lived near friends and countrymen that had come before them, which helped them to overcome housing and language difficulties. This established many settlement patterns that exist to this day. So basically, when you get off the boat, who's the first people you're looking for? People that look like you. People that speak the same language as you. And they're going to try to help you to be a successful American. So that was the cultural reason for it. Polish immigrants settled in Chicago, while Italians settled in New York. Scandinavians settled in Wisconsin and Minnesota. The reason why they went there, the Scandinavians, these are the Vikings basically, they are really good, and they have always been really good at being lumberjacks. They like to cut down trees. That's very popular in the Scandinavian countries. So Wisconsin and Minnesota were covered with old growth virgin forest that had never been cut down. And so with the Homestead Act, these Scandinavians would just go into the middle of the woods somewhere, build a house, stay there for 5 years, and then they owned 160 free acres of land, which they cut down all the trees. And then whenever the 5 years was up, they would sell the place, go build another house somewhere deeper in the woods, and they would collect all that wood as well, and they were able to sell it and make a very good living in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So the rest of them, the Asian immigration is the next one. Most Chinese immigrants came to the West Coast because China is directly across from the West Coast of America, right? I mean, that's the Pacific Ocean. And they helped to build the Transcontinental Railroad. Chinese were probably met with the most amount of racism from the nativists. They said that they were stealing their jobs, which was true. And they also said that they were driving down wages because Chinese people were willing to work for $0.25 a day, whereas an American would work for $1 a day. So now if you have a bunch of Chinese people, the white people and the black people have to work for a much lower wage to compete with the Chinese. All right, why did the most Chinese immigrants come to American West Coast in the mid-1800s? What were they trying to do here? They were trying to, like everybody else, find employment. They wanted to find jobs, okay? So in the 1880s, we have this depression, okay? It's called the Panic of 1880s. Ooh, I can't remember the year. It's a depression, and it's like a little mini Great Depression, right? And so what ended up happening was the nativists blamed the Chinese people for driving down wages and stealing our jobs. So the nativists demanded that Congress kick out the Chinese. They wanted to deport all Chinese people from the United States. Well, Congress did not go that far. But they did pass a new law in 1882 called the Chinese Exclusion Act, okay? And the main reason was because Chinese were stealing our jobs, all right? So it limited the Chinese immigrants. There would be no new Chinese people coming in, except for 2 exceptions, okay? So we let in the smart people with doctorate degrees and college degrees and such. And we let in rich Chinese people because these people would actually improve America and make America a better place, and they would spend their money here. Whereas unskilled Chinese laborers were not allowed to come here anymore after 1882. Now, if you left the country for any reason and you were a Chinese American, then you lost your citizenship and you could never get it back. So this ban on the Chinese lasted for a long time, folks. It was a major bit of immigration policy during the 1800s. So here we go. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 resulted in, it's going to be A, temporary but severe limitations on the entry to Chinese immigrants. We're not stopping them from coming over completely. We do allow 2 exceptions, but we're also not, just letting anybody in anymore. So it definitely changed things in America. Now, if you're Chinese and you're coming to the United States of America, you're going to be coming to San Francisco. And our major check-in area there was Angel Island. And very similar to the Europeans, which went to Ellis Island, Angel Island starts with an A, and Asian starts with an A. So the Asians went to Angel Island. That's how I remember that. Angel Island's a small island right in the harbor of San Francisco, next to Alcatraz Island in California. Okay, it's an immigrant processing center for the West Coast. In comparison to Ellis Island, it was brutal in its treatment and restriction of Asian immigrants. Okay, so we didn't exactly treat these people too nicely whenever they came to Angel Island. Okay, moving on. Black people moving around. Okay, Black Americans were given citizenship by the Republican Party. We have the 3 Civil Rights Amendment, 13, 14, 15. And the way you remember that is free citizens vote. Okay, so freedom for all black people, citizenship for everybody in the country except for Indians. And then 15th Amendment gives black men the right to vote. Well, with all these recent amendments being passed, black people had more freedom than ever. And a lot of young black men did not want to stay in the South. They wanted to move out, and they wanted to claim their piece of the Homestead Act. So they moved out west, and these young men were called the Exodusters. If you look right here, the root word Exodus is from the Bible, And in the Bible, that tells the story about how Moses and the Israelites left Egypt and slavery, and they went to the Promised Land, which is current day Israel. And that's why the Jews all live in Israel right now. A lot of them do anyway. After the Civil War, the South developed sharecropping, where sharecroppers rented the farmland from former planters by paying a share of the crop. However, they often didn't earn enough money to pay off their debts to the landowner, and so they basically sold themselves unwittingly back into slavery. This is a very evil system where black people became slaves again, not by law, but de facto. Okay, so in fact, they had laws on the books that said a black person could not leave the farm unless all of their debt had been paid to the landowner, and effectively it made them slaves again. Okay, African Americans also migrated to northern cities. I wonder what they were looking for there. Probably jobs, right? This migration increased significantly during World War I. It's called the Great Migration during World War I. African Americans left the South to escape racial violence and obtain better living conditions and jobs. Okay, so in this case, racial violence is the push, better living conditions is the pull for black people during this time. Alright, which was not a significant reason why African Americans migrated from the South to the industrial North during the early 20th century. We're going to say, let's see, political freedom, that sounds like a good reason. Jobs, absolutely. Living standards were higher, that's a good thing. Weather, not so much, okay? So this is not a reason why black people moved. They didn't move because of the weather. Alright, next one. After the Civil War, what problem did many African American sharecroppers encounter? Okay, they could not pay off their debts to their merchants, and therefore they were sold back into slavery. And that is going to be solved later on when W.E.B. Du Bois comes in and he creates the Tuskegee Institute that teaches black people how to farm more efficiently. Therefore, they get a bigger cut of the profits, and they are able to pay all this off and get out of sharecropping forever.